So first I want to give a blessing to all of you who came up to Torah to read this together. And the blessing is this. May you and we all be blessed with the ability to discern the difference between our egos or our self-deprecations, either one, and the voice of the eternal God of the universe, the force of healing and transformation, the force that calls us to love and care for each other, and not get those two confused. Instead, give us the wisdom to know when we hear what we think to be our inner voice, that we know that that inner voice is a voice of love and caring and kindness and generosity, and that anything else is a distorted hearing. So let us all be blessed with that capacity, and let that capacity then guide us through this coming year, when we will face many, many challenges in our country and in our environment and in our self. When we hear voices that may tell us very different things about what we ought to do, to give us the wisdom to hear the voice of God, the voice of love, the voice of kindness, the voice of generosity as the central voice that we hear, and be able to say no to the voices that dress themselves up as the God of the universe, or dress themselves up as the voice of common sense, or whatever, and distort our ability to hear deeply what the goddess, Shekhinah, whatever word we're going to put to her, is really asking us to do. And may you all who have that capacity have a wonderful and blessed New Year. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so now what are we going to make of all this that we've just read? It's, as I say, it's the most problematic, or one of the most problematic. There are other parts of it that are also problematic, but this one is a whopper, at least on first reading of it. So let me start by saying there's a problem that people who read this think that what it's really about is that Abraham had the courage to take his son to be sacrificed. Whereas we, in the Jewish renewal world and many other parts of the Jewish world, read it differently. Abraham is the father of our people, the founder of our people, the founder of the Israelites and the Jews. How come? Because in the last moment, he didn't do it. Because in the last moment, he didn't follow that voice. He heard a different voice, and he didn't do it. He had the courage to transform what he thought was the voice of God into a different voice. Okay? Now, how did this happen? Well, this isn't just troubling to our generation. The rabbis 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago already, were having problems with Abraham. And they asked, first of all, they said, Abraham, just in the previous chapter, God revealed that God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and Sodom and Amorah in Hebrew, and he was, and so God was, but God said, "I'll tell Abraham that I'm going to do this," and Abraham's response was, "What? What if they're yeah, it's a screwed up city, but what if there are 50 righteous people there?" God said, "Okay, if there are 50 righteous people, I won't destroy it." So as Abraham said, "Well, okay, what if there are 40 righteous people?" And God said, "Okay, if there are 40 righteous people, I won't destroy it." And Abraham said, What if there are 20 righteous people? And God said, okay, if there are 20 righteous people, I won't destroy it. And then finally, Abraham said, what if there are 10 righteous people? And God said, if there are 10 righteous people, I won't destroy it. And then God left the picture. Okay, that 10 became the minyan. When we say we need to have 10 people to pray together, it came from this story, that story. So the rabbis ask, look, here you have a guy who is able to argue with God about this city that he has no connection to, but with his own son he can't argue with God. He just passively accepts the hearing of that he hears from God, and so the rabbis had a great deal of trouble. And many stories, as in every part of the Torah, every part has had over the course of the several thousand years many stories developing that are not in the Torah that try to explain what's going on in the Torah at any particular point, particularly problematic points. Those stories are collectively called the midrash. And the midrash is a way of providing context and a way of a different look. So I want to read you first of all a midrash on this story that gives us some context for who is Abraham and how this could possibly happen. So it goes like this. And this, by the way, I reprinted in my book, Torah, Jewish Renewal. This and many other things in this book, Jewish Renewal. Okay, now Abraham's father was Terach, and according to the midrash, and here I'll start to read, Terach was a manufacturer of idols. Okay, not just an idol worshiper. He was making the idols. Okay, this is his father. Okay, he once went away somewhere and left Abraham to sell them in his place. A man came and wished to buy one. How old are you? Abraham asked him. 50 was the reply. Woe to such a man, he exclaimed. You are 50 years old and worship idols? Would a worship a day-old object? At this time, the man became ashamed and departed. Okay, so you can see he's not too cooperative with his father here. Okay, great. On another occasion, when his father left, he took an axe and broke the idols in the shop. And when his father came back, he demanded, "What have you done here? What have you done to them?" And Avram responded, "I cannot conceal it from you," he rejoined. A woman came with plateful of fine meal and requested me to offer it to them. One claimed, "I must eat them first," while another claimed, "I must eat them first." And thereupon the largest arose, took the stick, and broke them all these idols. His father says, "Why do you make sport of me? Have they then any knowledge?" And Abraham responded, "Should not your ears listen to what your mouth is saying?" Thereupon Terach seized Abraham and delivered him to Nimrod. And Nimrod is the chief honcho in the city, the leader of the city, the power elite of the city. Abraham, the son, challenged the worship of idols, and that is his father's livelihood. So his father has now lost his control and brought him to Nimrod. The Midrash tells us, Nimrod raises the issue and to get Abraham to worship something made from the earth. So perhaps he will worship on one or other element, fire, air, or water. But in each case, Abraham recognizes the limits of the fundamental elements. Ancient science is not going to entice him any more than the systems of power is not, and the system of power is not going to intimidate him. So Nimrod is enraged. Once he recognizes that Abraham is rejecting the idol worship that is central to the established order of the kingdom, and is accepting instead a God who is God of the universe, who created all things, but is not visible and is not reducible to any particular thing in the world, he's furious. According to the Midrash, he acts on his anger at the rebellious child by throwing Abraham into a fiery furnace. Miraculously, Abraham is saved. According to the Midrash, he emerges from the fire unburnt, unscathed. But is he really unscathed? No. What the Midrash tells us is that Abraham had a traumatic childhood. Okay, so a psychological explanation that we might think was derived from our Jewish brother Freud actually existed in the rabbis 2,000 years ago. So unable to accept the political religious system in which he grew up, he is immediately placed in conflict with them. They throw him into a fiery furnace. That's another way of saying physical abuse. Yet, so he becomes a victim of intense cruelty. If he emerges alive, but not unscathed, actually, he is traumatized by this, and that trauma continues in him. So now, the rabbis didn't use this term, but we talk about the repetition compulsion. That is the tendency of people to pass on to others, particularly their own children, traumas that were done to them. And if we can understand that, then we understand that that Abraham is now taking his child to do to the child what was done to him when he was a child. And that's a tremendous pull. And we see this, you can see this in so many people, particularly people today. We know the horrendous stories of how Trump was abused as a child and ended up abusing others. And we know many other cases of this. In fact, many people who are much better than Trump, who are decent people in a variety of ways, suddenly act out of this kind of childhood trauma that they've been carrying with them for a long time. And actually, Abraham, in the stories about him, the way he treats Sarah, he's not exemplar of anything. This is the moment that changes everything for us about who Abraham is. Abraham hears a different voice. He hears a different voice at the end of this struggle. And in so doing, he breaks the chain of pain that has held together the generations before. And this is really when we say, well, why in the world would he have heard it this way? Well, there's a hint of it in the text of the Hebrew, which unfortunately, who were we reading? That was, who translated? Well,
it was Perry, but in the Hebrew it shows it.
Okay. I know, in the Hebrew it shows it, but in the English it doesn't. In the Hebrew, it says, it uses, when the voice that he hears, that's translated as God, the word is Ha Elohim, the gods. Okay, Elohim is plural. It's a plural. Now the gods, the word Elohim is used in the Torah at the very beginning to talk about the God creating the universe. Okay, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. So Elohim has been used in the Bible, but Ha-Elohim, the God, the Elohim, this is much more like the gods. But anyway, there's a distinction between Elohim in Torah and Yud He Vav He. Elohim refers to the world when it's fixed in a certain way. When Bereshit bara Elohim, when Elohim creates the heaven and the earth, the heaven has a regular pattern to it, and the earth has a regular pattern to it. We call it nature. It repeats over and over and over again the way it is. It follows fixed laws. So Ha Elohim, and that when other traditions worship the gods, they were also worshiping that nature that has a continuous, predictable way of being it. But Yud He Vav He, as I've taught before, and some of you have heard this, the root of that is He Vav He, which is the present tense. But when the Yud is in front of it, that indicates future tense. In other words, He Vav He is, and Yud He Vav He is the movement from that which is to that which ought to be. And this is a revolutionary concept of God. God reveals herself, himself, itself again to Moses, and Moses tells Moses to go back to the inner city to free his people. And Moses has an argument with God, and Moses says, "Okay, look, when I go to speak to Pharaoh, what shall I tell him your name is?" And God says, "Ehyeh asher ehyeh, I will be whom I shall be." Wildly mistranslated in the King James version of the New Testament as "I am who I am." But Yud He Vav He means I will be whom I will be. Ehyeh asher ehyeh means that I am not some fixed reality. I am the possibility of possibility. I am that which can be, that which can transform that which is to that which can be. Now, when we look at this story, and at the end there is an angel or a messenger from Yud He Vav He. Yud He Vav He, not Ha Elohim. It's a totally different God. Okay, it's not Ha Elohim, the fixed reality of the world. It is the principle of transformation and healing that is speaking to him. So this is why Abraham is the father of our people, because he was the first one to see, to hear the message that said, you can break through the repetition compulsion. You don't have to be stuck in it. You can see that it is wrong and can overcome it, can transcend it. And in that moment, looking into the eyes of his son, he sees something very different. He sees, he sees and hears a different voice. The voice that says, don't do this. Don't do this. Okay? You don't have to do it. You're breaking the repetition compulsion. And in so doing, he creates the Jewish people. Because the fundamental message of the Jewish people is this very same message, that which is not that which has to be. That the world can be fundamentally healed and transformed. Okay, so you don't have to be stuck this way, and you don't have to kill your kid. Okay?
Phew.
Okay. You don't have to abuse your kid. You don't have to do to others what was done to you. In other words, it's not a sufficient explanation that you are traumatized as a child to forgive you for everything. No, there's a moral voice, an ethical voice in the universe that is saying, do not act out of that compulsion that you have to do to others what was done to you, to do to those whom you care about what was done to you. Okay, now then, how come the rest of the story? Okay, you're trying to save your child, but here's the complicating fact that made somebody, instead of ending the story there, go on and say, well, there was another voice that says, you did the right thing to do this. You listened to God. You didn't withhold your son, and therefore I will bless you. So there, it seems as if that voice is also saying it was the right thing to do. Okay, to take your child and then to not do it. Okay, but still, there's something in there that makes you think, wait a second, maybe God is approving that he did that, then God is screwed up. We don't want a God like that. And that was the voice of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, that angel. So, as we know, maybe any of you who've studied any of the development of Torah know that the Torah is put together by a bunch of people. It wasn't all delivered to Moses on Sinai. It was actually written, at least written down. Maybe he heard it all. Moses heard it all, but he didn't write it down. He only wrote down the 10 speech acts. Okay, that we'll read on Yom Kippur. But here, this part is an amalgam. It's put together as is many parts of the Torah, where you'll hear one voice, the voice of love and kindness and generosity. In the next sentence, you'll hear a voice that's a different voice, a voice of cruelty or pain or domination or hurt. And it can drive you crazy if you're trying to think, how do I reconcile these two voices? Better to understand that the Torah has two voices in it. The voice of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, of transformation and healing, and the voice of the collective pain that people have been in. And many places in Torah, you hear this inconsistency between these two voices. So, but why? Why here in particular would it be there? Well, okay, now we have the father wanting to protect his son. He's looked at his son's eyes and he won't hurt him. He doesn't want to hurt him. And from that, develop a people that have a message that's a revolutionary message. But here's the actual tragedy of Jewish history. That when you carry this revolutionary message, you actually are potentially sacrificing your son or your children. Because, and this has been understood many, many generations for thousands of years, which is when many people convert out of Judaism, because they want the security of the existing order. So they try to, they convert to the Greek gods, and they then converted to the Roman gods, or then they converted to Christianity or to any other religion that doesn't have this command, that doesn't have this message that it's putting out, that the world should be fundamentally transformed, and it can be transformed. And you, as Jews, have the obligation to bring that message to the world, that nothing is stuck and fixed. But when you tell that to your children, when you teach this to your children, you're putting them in danger, because the power in the world doesn't want anybody to hear this. And as a result, we've had several thousand years of anti-Semitism before Christianity already. In the ancient world, they were demeaning Jews. Why Jews? Because Jews were the most revolutionary element in the ancient world. And you have the same thing today. I mean, you've had it through history. That, it wasn't a mistake that Karl Marx came from a Jewish background, and that Freud came from a Jewish background. All the people who are the idol breakers, the smashers of idols of their time, many of them, vastly disproportionate number of them, are Jews. And today you look in this country at white people, and it turns out that the only group of white people that vote as a cohesive force, 70% vote for against their own economic interests in a narrow sense, but vote for liberal or progressive forces. The rest of the white people are divided half and half, basically, going one way or another. And Jews are 70%. I mean, this is and you can see there's a surge now of anti-Semitism, because there's those who want to support the established order feel angry at Jews who are not with the program. So it's putting your child in danger. So this is the incredible contradiction of saving your child. You're saving your child for a tradition that is a dangerous tradition. It's much safer to go and convert to something else that doesn't require you to challenge the existing order. But this is also the calling of the Jewish people, to hear God's voice as a voice of transformation and healing, and to say to all the powers, the world can be fundamentally healed and transformed. And so in rewriting the story, I believe that those who put the story together at the end wrote in these last few sentences that made it sound as though God approved of Abraham because of what he did to bring his son to the altar, whereas the angel, when he's speaking to Abraham the first time, is saying, "Don't do it," and Abraham doesn't do it. Okay, he breaks the repetition compulsion, and we are saying to the world, to everybody in the world, including ourselves, we can break the repetition compulsion. Doesn't mean that we're free of it because we believe that. Okay, there's still struggles that we have to do ourselves to make sure that we are not acting out some of the craziness and some of the hurt, some of the pain of our parents or grandparents or great-grandparents or our people as a whole, acting it out. It's certainly what's happening in Israel today. In the last, at least the last several 30 years or 40 years of Israel acting out on the Palestinians, what was acted out on us in Europe. The Palestinians didn't do it. They were not to say that they didn't do a lot of acts of violence against the Jews who wanted to recreate our ancient homeland in Palestine. They did acts of violence and hurtful acts of violence. But the anger that comes from many Israelis towards Palestinians is largely based on the experience that our people have had for 2,000 years. Okay, we have been traumatized. We don't have to act out that trauma on the Palestinian people anymore. Okay, we could stop it. We're not insecure anymore. We are one of the biggest military powers in the world. Okay, certainly in the Middle East, the biggest. So, but nevertheless, the trauma is still there. Okay, so when you say, what's so great about Abraham? Hey, he overcame the trauma at the critical moment. Halavai, I want to bless all of us that we also can overcome the traumas, the distortions that we've inherited from our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, or from our people as a whole, and be an embodiment of the highest God energy of the universe. And let us say amen to that.